Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we're going to explore what the Deadlights are. One of the most mysterious, hypnotic, and deeply disturbing concepts within the vast and terrifying universe of it. Stephen King's monumental work is undoubtedly that of the Will-o'-the-Wisps, also known as the Deadlights. This is not merely an eye-catching visual device or a narrative effect that gives you chills. It is an element that, for decades, has fueled the fascination and fear of readers and viewers alike. The Will-o'-the-Wisps are not just a display of lights floating in the dark. They are a manifestation of the ineffable, a doorway to what lies beyond reality, a reflection of the true and terrifying essence of it. And behind these unnatural, orange lights lie questions that tear at the mind. What really happens to those who dare to look directly at these death lights? What do their eyes and consciousness perceive? What fragments of their mind, or even their soul, become trapped forever in a plane humans are not meant to comprehend? These enigmas are treated in a much more direct and tangible way in the modern cinematic adaptations of it, 2017 and 2019, directed by Andy Muschietti, where the Will-o'-the-Wisps stop being an abstract concept and become a concrete threat, visually terrifying and emotionally devastating. However, their significance is not limited to these films. The recent episode 7 of Welcome to Derry brings them back into focus, brutally showing how children's encounters with these lights lead to tragic and sometimes irreversible fates. Cases like those of Will Hanlon, Ingrid K.S., also known as Ingrid Gray, and little Will Halloran demonstrate a consistent pattern. Direct exposure to the Will-o'-the-Wisps is not just dangerous, it is lethal, and the aftermath of these encounters is not merely physical, but mental and spiritual, leaving scars that can never be erased. For all these reasons, in this analysis we go far beyond the superficial. First, we will explore what the Will-o'-the-Wisps truly are within the universe of it, understanding their role in the macroverse, and their connection to the primordial essence of the entity we all know as Pennywise. Then, we will take a detailed tour of every significant appearance of these lights throughout the saga, from the original novel to the 1990 miniseries through the modern films, and finally, the new narrative continuity created by Andy Muschietti, a continuity explicitly approved by Stephen King. And finally, we will reach the core of the horror, what people perceive, feel, and endure when they face the Will-o'-the-Wisps head-on, an encounter that transcends any conventional concept of fear. With that said, it's time to delve into the darkest and most disturbing aspects of the story, in the history of it, and in the broader context of Stephen King's multiverse, including subtle references in The Dark Tower and Insomnia. A fundamental truth is revealed. The true nature of it is neither physical nor confined to our universe. Its real essence resides in what King calls the Deadlights, the Deathlights, known in popular language as Will-o'-the-Wisps. These entities are not mere flames floating in darkness, but emanations from a completely different plane of existence, dangerously unnatural. Their color is orange, but in a hue impossible to replicate or describe accurately in human terms. Looking directly at these lights is equivalent to confronting the very essence of horror, to witnessing it in its purest form. These lights exist in what is known as the macroverse or macrocosm, a plane of existence that transcends our physical universe and is intimately linked to the Ta-darkness, the total darkness. This is not a place that can be visited by human means, nor a conventional alternate dimension. It is a space where the laws of physics and perception collapse, where human consciousness cannot endure without disintegrating. From there, Pennywise exerts its true power. The Will-o'-the-Wisps are its original, vital, and primordial form, and everything we see of it in Derry, the clown, the beast, the changelings that stalk children, is merely a limited projection, a manifestation designed to interact with our world and instill fear. This duality explains how the entity feeds. In the physical plane, It consumes flesh and blood, but in its authentic non-material state, it nourishes itself with something far more powerful: the pure fear and despair of its victims. Pennywise's iconic phrase, "You'll float too," takes on a far more terrifying meaning when interpreted from this perspective. Those who gaze upon the will-o'-the-wisps end up floating not just figuratively, but literally suspended in the macrocosm, trapped in a state of existence that is neither life nor death, before ultimately being consumed by the entity. The macrocosm, however, is not simply a distant place. It is the very origin of it. Pennywise does not come from another planet or galaxy. Its essence is inherent to this impossible plane of existence, and only its physical manifestation is temporarily anchored in our universe. From there, it has fallen and manifested in Derry, a place it has shaped and watched over for decades, a carefully constructed stage designed to trap humans and feed its endless hunger. As King describes in the novel, it had created a place in its own image and looked upon that place with pleasure from the deadlights that served as its eyes. Derry was its slaughterhouse, and its inhabitants, its flock. This passage brutally encapsulates the relationship between it, the Deadlights, and the city of Derry. Any direct interaction with these lights is not an accident nor a simple scare, but a direct contact with the destructive essence of a cosmic entity. Those who look at them head-on not only face extreme fear, their minds can shatter, their sanity collapse, and many end up dead or catatonic. To behold the Deadlights is more than looking at it. It is confronting the true reality of horror, an experience that almost no human being can endure. Within the vast and terrifying universe of it, the first human to face the will-o'-the-wisps directly, that is, the true and bare essence of the creature, is Beverly Marsh, still only a young girl. This encounter does not occur under normal circumstances or in a familiar environment. It takes place in the darkest, dampest depths of the Derry sewers, the very heart of Pennywise's territory, at the precise moment when the creature opens its mouth and reveals what truly lies behind its makeup, grotesque smile, and clownish gestures. In that instant, Beverly pierces the illusion, ceasing to see the clown as such, and peers into an impossible abyss, a void flooded with orange lights that do not belong to our world. In the novel, this experience is devastating beyond imagination. Beverly's mind becomes saturated by the intensity of the vision, her consciousness collapsing immediately under the impossibility of processing what she is witnessing. There are no human words capable of describing what the Deadlights mean. The experience surpasses any known form of terror, because it is not merely fear, it is a direct confrontation with the very essence of it, knowledge that the human brain is not designed to withstand. Andy Muschietti's cinematic adaptation translates this experience into a brutally impactful visual language. Beverly's eyes turn an unnatural white, pierced by orange flashes that seem to burn through her pupils and scorch her perception, while her body remains suspended in midair, rigid, devoid of will or response, trapped in an utterly catatonic trance. Each passing second feels eternal, and the viewer is acutely aware that even a fraction of this contact would be enough to destroy any human mind. The book, however, goes even further into the disturbing. It describes how Beverly's mind becomes trapped in a hellish plane outside of time, a space where she floats alongside countless souls, revolving within the living void formed by Pennywise's will-o'-the-wisps. There are no faces, bodies, or recognizable forms there. Perception is reduced to an environment dominated by pure terror, a space of infinitude and chaos where human consciousness confronts the impossibility of comprehension. It is like peering into a cosmic abyss, a void beyond time and logic, where mere observation is an act of self-destruction. When the mind cannot process what it sees, it does the only thing it can to survive. It shuts down. The result is a body completely inert, disconnected from physical reality, while the consciousness remains suspended in that limbo of absolute horror. Bill Denbrough also witnesses the will-o'-the-wisps in the novel, though only partially and in a limited way. This distinction is crucial. Bill does not observe them directly, which allows him to survive contact with its true essence. Even so, the psychological damage is profound. The partial contact leaves a permanent mark, a fear that accompanies him for decades, a reminder of the fragility of the human mind in the face of the cosmic. Later, as an adult, during the performance of the Ritual of Chud, Bill reaches an extraordinary mental state, a liminal moment in which he confronts it in its authentic form and approaches the Deadlights without being destroyed instantly. In that brief but crucial instant, his consciousness exists outside the normal flow of the universe. He observes reality from an external angle, suspended between planes, with perception expanded beyond time and space. This contact allows him to comprehend the entity's true nature and, thanks to the intervention of the cosmic turtle Maturin and his own willpower, resist and complete the ritual, ending it. In the adult stage of the story, other direct victims of the Deathlights include Tom Rogan, Beverly's violent husband, and Audra, Bill's wife. Tom manages to penetrate deep into the sewers, directly into the heart of Pennywise's lair. When he gazes at the will-o'-the-wisps head-on, his body and mind cannot withstand exposure to this cosmic horror. His consciousness collapses instantly, vital functions fail, and death occurs swiftly. Contact with the Deadlights allows no margin for error. It is lethal even for adults, even for those with experience and courage. Audra's case is different. Her encounter with the will-o'-the-wisps is not intended to kill her outright. Pennywise immerses her in a catatonic state and transports her as a trophy to his lair. There, he keeps her suspended in a limbo between life and death, planning to use her as an instrument of psychological torture against Bill during the Ritual of Chud. In this context, exposure to the Deadlights does not always mean immediate death, but rather the imposition of prolonged horror, a mental suffering that Pennywise can manipulate at will. Within Andy Muschietti's cinematic continuity and the Welcome to Derry series, it is shown that Beverly becomes trapped in the will-o'-the-wisps and is rescued thanks to Ben's kiss. However, even after her rescue, the girl recounts that the experience left an indelible mark. During the time Pennywise kept her suspended, she perceived visions that terrified her to her core. All of them showed the deaths of the members of the Losers Club, while around her existed only the ethereal orange lights, suspended in an infinite void. Beverly describes these visions as the impossibility of intervening, of altering the flow of events, and as an experience that placed her outside of time. Past, present, and future were perceived simultaneously, trapping her in the absolute horror of witnessing everything and being powerless to act. That is why, when Pennywise reappears before Beverly in her adult stage, adopting the identity of Bob Gray within Ingrid Kirsch's old house, it is not a casual or improvised encounter. Every word, every gesture, every movement is calculated to pierce her psychological defenses and strike where it hurts the most. The creature tells her that she is still the same, that she has never changed, and that she will never be able to save anyone. With this statement, Pennywise not only validates the visions Beverly had shared about the future, but explicitly declares its intention to destroy them all without exception, demonstrating that its power transcends time, memory, and human will. It is an attack that is both emotional and existential. It is not merely a physical battle, but a manipulation of the deepest fears and of perception itself. Later, during the final confrontation in it, Chapter 2, Richie Tozier is shown momentarily trapped by the will-o'-the-wisps. The Deathlights envelop him, immobilizing him in an instant of absolute trance. His body hangs suspended in midair, disconnected from any contact with reality, while his mind is drawn toward a plane that transcends space and time. The connection to Richie is abruptly broken when Eddie Kaspbrak manages to wound Pennywise by stabbing a spear into its mouth. That impact not only injures the creature physically, but also severs the psychic link that kept Richie under its control, freeing him before the exposure becomes irreversible. This scene clearly demonstrates how interaction with the will-o'-the-wisps is an extremely delicate act. A single second of contact can be enough to shatter the mind and body, while a moment of intervention can save the victim's life. Something very similar occurs in the prequel series, Welcome to Derry, with Ingrid Kirsch, also known as Ingrid Gray. After discovering the painful truth that Pennywise is not her possessed father, and accepting that she cannot save him, Ingrid makes a critical decision: to face the creature with a clear mind, without illusions or deceit. By looking it straight in the eye and declaring that it is not her father, that everything has been a lie, she immediately triggers its most lethal response. Pennywise first subjects her to intense psychological torture, exploiting her emotions, memories, and deepest fears. Then it grotesquely opens its mouth to reveal the Deadlights. Ingrid floats, motionless, trapped in a deep catatonic state, suspended between life and death, completely vulnerable to the creature's cosmic essence. Some time later, a nearly identical fate befalls Will Hanlon. Pennywise attempts to break him emotionally with subtlety, through phone calls that sow fear and doubt, constructing a gradual terror scenario. But the psychological strategy becomes physical when the monster materializes in front of him and opens its jaws, exposing the Deadlights directly. The outcome is the same as in other cases. Will falls into an extreme catatonic state, unable to react, trapped in a void that does not belong to our world. Analyzing all these cases together, one can begin to understand more clearly what happens when someone is exposed to the will-o'-the-wisps or Deadlights. The victim's consciousness is ripped from the normal flow of space and time, thrown into a reality that overwhelmingly exceeds any human capacity for comprehension. It is a plane that is not only unnatural, but challenges logic and sensory perception itself, something existing outside our universe, beyond life and death as we know them. Depending on Pennywise's intent, the body may collapse immediately, resulting in instant death, or remain shut down, suspended like an empty vessel while the mind is absorbed by the Deadlights. The mind, in turn, suffers an equally extreme collapse. Consciousness fragments. The person enters a catatonic state comparable to a vegetative condition, and physical control almost entirely disappears. The first seconds of contact are the most critical. The mind is literally dragged toward the place where it resides, a plane of existence outside the laws of space and time. What is perceived there may manifest as an infinite cosmic void, charged with absolute terror, or as physical visions of indescribably horrible entities, impossible worlds, and nightmares that defy human logic. In any case, the victim is directly exposed to its authentic essence, confronting a horror that cannot be fully understood or narrated. However, Stephen King deliberately keeps this phenomenon shrouded in ambiguity. He never provides complete explanations or exact definitions regarding the will-o'-the-wisps, and he does so intentionally. This mystery reinforces its character as pure cosmic horror, where incomprehensibility is more terrifying than any rational explanation. The central idea is that the human mind is simply not prepared to face something like this and emerge intact. Survivors, if there are any, emerge altered, trapped in madness, with fragmented memories, or with the persistent sensation of not being fully anchored to reality. That is the legacy of the Deadlights, a terror that does not disappear with daylight, but imprints itself on the brain and soul, marking one's perception of the world forever, and leaving the certainty that some things are too vast, too ancient, and too horrific to ever be confronted. One of the most fascinating and at the same time most unsettling aspects we can observe in both the films directed by Andy Muschietti and the series Welcome to Derry, and which appears in the novel in a subtler yet equally significant way, is that the connection between the will-o'-the-wisps and the person exposed to them is not always definitive or immediate. We are not dealing with an unavoidable bond that automatically condemns the victim. Interaction with the Deadlights can be interrupted, although this requires very precise circumstances and considerable external force. This possibility is clearly demonstrated in the case of Beverly Marsh, when, as an adult, she is rescued by Ben through a gesture as simple as a kiss. That contact works because it abruptly breaks the connection between her and it, interrupting the catatonic trance that kept her suspended in a partial state of consciousness within the Deadlights. Similarly, Richie Tozier manages to escape thanks to Eddie Kaspbrak during the final confrontation in it. Chapter 2. Richie was on the verge of crossing a point of no return, but Eddie's intervention, by injuring Pennywise, severs the link before the damage becomes irreversible. These examples suggest that if the influence of the will-o'-the-wisps is broken quickly and forcefully enough, there is still a chance to rescue the victim without permanent consequences. However, the situation changes drastically when exposure is prolonged. In these cases, the victim becomes submerged in a deep trance or catatonia, and only an extremely powerful, personal, and intimate emotional stimulus, something that directly connects with the individual's deepest emotional bonds, could interrupt the connection. Even then, if Pennywise has already begun feeding on the victim's fear and despair, the outcome is usually tragic or irreversible. The person may become permanently trapped in a coma-like state, unable to fully return to reality. This delicate balance between survival and destruction highlights the true nature of the will-o'-the-wisps. It is not merely physical or psychological terror, but an attack on consciousness and the soul, on the very perception of existence. Although King never confirms it absolutely, all evidence points to the fact that the intensity and lethality of the will-o'-the-wisps depend directly on its intent when using them. It is one thing when its goal is to terrify or traumatize emotionally, and quite another when it chooses to kill instantly. The victim's mental fortitude also plays a fundamental role. Those with a strong emotional anchor, whether love for others, positive memories, or the determination to protect someone, can resist partially, though almost always with deep psychological repercussions. These bonds act as genuine lifelines, pulling consciousness back to reality and preventing it from being completely absorbed into the macrocosmic plane where the Deadlights reside. However, even when survival occurs, the experience leaves lasting scars. Persistent nightmares, extreme anxiety, fragmented memories, and a constant sense that reality is more fragile than previously believed. With all this in mind, it is possible to anticipate what might happen with Ingrid Kirsch, Ingrid Gray, and Will Hanlon in the final episode of the first season of it, Welcome to Derry. We know that Ingrid remains in a catatonic state for an extended period after her direct encounter with Pennywise, while in Will's case the narrative suggests a total disappearance following his exposure to the will-o'-the-wisps, reinforced by the inclusion of his image in the missing children's pamphlets shown in the trailer for the season finale. For those familiar with Stephen King's universe, both characters survive, as they later reappear in other stories by the author, and Andy Muschietti's continuity tends to respect these facts. It is highly unlikely that the director would drastically alter the fate of characters whose futures are already established in the original work. However, even if they survive, the exposure leaves indelible marks on both. In Ingrid's case, the aftermath seems especially severe. She is likely tormented by intense visions related to her involuntary collaboration with Pennywise, by the atrocious acts committed in the hope of saving her father, and by the memory of her powerlessness when confronting absolute horror face to face. Will, for his part, may have initially been trapped in a catatonic state similar to Beverly's, though he eventually emerges, probably thanks to an emotional stimulus or a bond that anchors him to reality, replicating the pattern established in the saga. All of this leads to an inevitable conclusion. The will-o'-the-wisps represent one of the most powerful, disturbing, and fascinating concepts within the story of it. They constitute a form of pure cosmic horror, an encounter with the incomprehensible, the unnatural, and the absolute. Stephen King deliberately keeps this element shrouded in mystery, leaving spaces of ambiguity that intensify the terror, because the human mind is not equipped to process the magnitude of what the Deadlights represent. Andy Muschietti, for his part, manages to translate this abstraction into extraordinary visual language. His depiction of the will-o'-the-wisps is simultaneously hypnotically beautiful and deeply terrifying. He conveys the idea of something humans were never meant to see or understand, a plane of existence that transcends our reality, where the essence of it is revealed in all its magnitude and power. It is a narrative and visual challenge that the saga executes with impressive effectiveness, combining terror, fascination, and absolute respect for King's original work. Ultimately, the will-o'-the-wisps are far more than an aesthetic device or a jump scare. They are the very heart of its cosmic horror, a reminder that there are things in the universe beyond our comprehension, and that even the most heroic acts or the strongest bonds can only partially mitigate the impact of their presence.